There is a cartouche painted on the ceiling of a chamber, so deep inside the Great Pyramid that no human eye saw it for 4,500 years. It carries a name. And that single name is the only reason the world tells you who built Giza. Now stop and think about that. The largest, most precise stone monument on Earth. 6 million tons of limestone. Cut, dragged, and stacked into a shape so exact it still aligns with true north to within a fraction of a degree. And the entire story of who made it rests on a few strokes of red paint hidden in a sealed box of granite above the king's chamber, found by one man in 1837. The name says Khufu. The hieroglyphs say more than that. Read literally. They don't say a pharaoh built this. They name a group, a gang, a people who called themselves the followers of something. And the moment you take those signs at face value, instead of the polished version in the textbooks, the official story of Giza starts to come apart in your hands. Today, we're going to read what the hieroglyphs actually say, not the summary, the signs themselves. We're going to trace the names carved into the stone, follow them out of the pyramid and across a desert to a sealed cave on the Red Sea, and ask the question the textbooks skip. Who were the followers, and where did they come from? If you find buried history as unsettling as I do, subscribe and turn on the bell, because what we found doesn't fit the version you were taught. Let's start with the chamber, because almost nobody knows it exists. When you picture the inside of the Great Pyramid, you picture the Grand Gallery, the King's Chamber, that famous empty granite box. What you don't picture is what sits directly above it. 5 low compartments stacked one on top of another, separated by slabs of granite, each weighing as much as a city bus. Engineers call them the relieving chambers. They were built to take the crushing weight of the pyramid above and channel it around the royal burial chamber so the ceiling wouldn't collapse. Here is the strange part. The Great Pyramid is almost completely silent inside. No inscriptions, no prayers, no painted gods, no story of the king. Every other royal tomb in Egypt is covered wall to wall in text. This one, the greatest of them all, is bare. The interior of the Great Pyramid is not decorated with hieroglyphics. For a monument this important, that should be impossible. Except in those hidden compartments. Up there, where no priest, no visitor, no mourner was ever meant to go. Someone left marks. Rough, red, painted signs. Quarry marks and work gang graffiti. And among them, the only thing in the entire structure that names a king. That name was found by a British army colonel named Richard William Howard Vyse. In 1837, frustrated, under pressure, and finding nothing, Vyse used gunpowder. He blasted his way upward through the solid core of the pyramid into chambers no one had entered since they were sealed. He named them after his sponsors: Wellington's Chamber, Nelson's, Lady Arbuthnot's, Campbell's, and on the ceiling of Campbell's chamber, the highest one, he reported finding it, a cartouche, the royal name ring of Khufu. That cartouche is the entire foundation. It is the single piece of physical evidence found inside the pyramid itself that ties the Great Pyramid to the pharaoh Khufu and to the date around 2600 BCE. Pull that one painted name out of the picture, and Egyptology has almost nothing left inside the structure to date it with. So everything depends on those signs being exactly what they appear to be. And that is where the trouble begins. Because the inscription doesn't simply say Khufu, the cartouche sits inside a longer line of text. And translated, that line reads as the followers, the gang of Khufu. Not a tomb dedication, not a king announcing his monument. A crew tag, the signature of a work gang, the kind of marking laborers daubed onto blocks to identify which team had hauled and placed them. For decades, scholars treated this as settled. Case closed. Khufu built it, his workmen signed it, the date is fixed. But the more carefully people looked at those marks, the more questions appeared. And the first clue is hiding in the very name everyone trusts. Here's the first thing that doesn't add up. There isn't one royal name up there. There are two. In Campbell's chamber, you get the cartouche read as Khufu. But in the chamber just below, Lady Arbuthnot's chamber, there's another one, a different spelling. Scholars call it Khnum-Kuf. Same king, supposedly, but written with the name of a different god, the ram-headed creator god Khnum, fused into it. Two versions of the builder's name in two different sealed chambers in two different hands. The mainstream explanation is simple. Ancient scribes were inconsistent. Spelling varied. Khufu and Khnum-Kuf are just two forms of the same royal name, and the work gangs used whichever they liked. That explanation works until you look at how the signs were actually painted. The marks in these chambers mix styles. Some of the numerical signs are drawn facing the wrong direction. The hieratic, the cursive shorthand the scribes used, doesn't all match the period it's supposed to come from. In one chamber, the king is credited to witnesses by name. In the next chambers, where the most important cartouche appears, those same careful acknowledgments vanish. Vyse recorded who watched him find the marks in the first chamber. He went quiet about exactly how the crucial one in Campbell's chamber came to light. For decades, almost no one questioned it. Then one man did, loudly. Zechariah Sitchin, in his book The Stairway to Heaven, accused Vyse outright. He claimed the colonel, desperate to discover something and prove his rivals wrong, forged the Khufu cartouche himself, painted it in, faked, the only evidence that names the builder. Now, Sitchin built a lot of theories on shaky ground, and we'll come back to that. But the forgery question did not die with him. It got more serious. In recent years, researchers went back to Vyse's own private field notes from 1837, his personal diaries. And what they describe is uncomfortable. Notes and drawings that appear to show Vyse carefully planning where painted markings would go in Campbell's chamber, taking pains to make them look authentic. There's even a sequence where a cartouche disc appears to get altered, the spelling adjusted, after Vyse learned it might be wrong, with the facsimile drawing sent to the British Museum updated to match. And there's a detail that should stop you cold. Of all the chambers Vyse blasted into, the one discovered before his arrival, the Davison chamber, the one he didn't open, has no such royal markings at all. Nowhere else in the entire Great Pyramid can these painted cartouches be found. Only in the rooms Vyse opened with gunpowder. A 2026 academic reassessment put it carefully. The evidence attributing the pyramid to Khufu rests on markings obtained under conditions that would not meet modern archaeological standards. That is scholar language for, we would never accept this if it happened today. So the first clue is this. The name that dates the Great Pyramid was found by one man, under pressure, behind walls he blasted open, and there are real reasons to question whether the signs are exactly what we were told. That doesn't prove a hoax, but it cracks the foundation. And it forces a bigger question. If we can't fully trust the name inside the pyramid, what did the builders actually leave behind that we can trust? That's the second clue. And to find it, we have to leave Giza entirely, because there is real, physical, undisputed proof of the men who worked on the Great Pyramid. It just wasn't found in the pyramid. It was found in a cave on the shore of the Red Sea, 130 miles away. In 2013, a French and Egyptian team, led by the Egyptologist Pierre Tallet, was excavating an ancient harbor called Wadi El Jarf. Inside sealed storage galleries cut into the rock, they found fragments of papyrus, hundreds of pieces. They turned out to be the oldest inscribed papyri ever discovered in Egypt, more than 4,500 years old. And one of them changed everything. It is a logbook, a daily work diary kept by a middle-ranking official, an inspector named Merer, during the 27th year of the reign of Khufu. Merer wasn't writing mythology. He was writing logistics. Day by day, he recorded what his team of about 40 men did. He described moving limestone blocks by boat from the quarries at Tura across the Nile, to a place he called Akhet Khufu, the horizon of Khufu, the ancient name of the Great Pyramid. This is the thing that ancient astronaut theories almost never account for. So let's be honest about it. The Merer Papyrus is a real contemporary first-person account of work connected to the Great Pyramid. It names Khufu. It describes ordinary men hauling ordinary stone. Other papyri from the same cash record sheep brought in to feed the workers, rations handed out, the boring paperwork of a massive building project. Not similar to a construction record, not inspired by one, an actual one. And the detail in it is almost unbearable in its ordinariness. Merer's team operated on a schedule. They moved blocks in cycles, several days, to load and ferry a shipment of fine white limestone from the Tura quarries across the river to the building site, then back again for the next load. He logged the names of the officials above him. He recorded a stop at the royal residence. He described the great basins and waterways the Egyptians engineered to float multi-ton stones almost to the foot of the plateau. This is a man doing his job and filing his reports. And his reports happen to be the closest thing we will ever have to standing on that site and watching the Great Pyramid rise, course by course. It speaks volumes about the scale of the project that these documents, written by people directly involved in the construction, were not found at Giza at all. They were carried to a working harbor on the far side of the eastern desert, stored in galleries cut into the rock, and then sealed behind heavy stone slabs when the port was shut down. And there they stayed, untouched, until 2013. So why does the most detailed account of building the Great Pyramid turn up in a cave on the Red Sea instead of at Giza? Why is the inside of the pyramid silent, while the real records were carried 130 miles away and sealed in rock? The builders documented their work obsessively. They just didn't leave it where you'd expect. And the place they did leave it had to be deliberately sealed, hidden, and then forgotten for 4,500 years before anyone found it again. Hold that thought. The pattern is starting to repeat. The most important evidence is always sealed, always hidden, always somewhere other than where the story is told. And the third clue is the one that takes that pattern and pushes it past anything the textbooks will follow. Because the work gangs didn't just write the king's name, they wrote their own. And their names are strange. Those red marks in the relieving chambers and on blocks across the Giza plateau include the names the crews gave themselves. And the Egyptians named their work gangs after loyalty to the king. We have crews whose names translate to things like the followers of Khufu in the gang, friends of Khufu. That word, followers, is the thread to pull. In Egyptian, it carries a specific weight. To be a follower was to belong to someone, to serve a divine being and carry out their will. And there is one group of followers that runs underneath all of Egyptian history like a buried river, the Shemsu Hor, the followers of Horus. This is where the records get genuinely hard to explain. The Egyptians kept king lists, long stone and papyrus records of who ruled and for how long. The most famous is the Turin Royal Canon, a papyrus written in the reign of Ramesses II. We have the Palermo stone, older still, and these are not fringe documents. They are the official memory of Egyptian civilization, kept by the Egyptians themselves. And before the first human pharaoh, before Menes, before the dynasties, those lists record other rulers. First, the gods. The Turin list opens with 10 Neteru, 10 gods reigning for enormous spans of time. And then, between the gods and the human kings, it records a transitional class, semi-divine beings, neither fully god nor fully man. The Shemsu Hor, the followers of Horus. Mainstream Egyptology has a clean answer for this. It's mythology, symbolic prehistory, a way for the Egyptians to give their kingship a divine origin, the way every culture invents a golden age. The long reigns aren't real. They're legend dressed up as record. But here's the problem with calling it pure myth. The Shemsu Hor don't appear in one stray text. They appear in independent sources across roughly 15 centuries. The Turin Canon, the pyramid texts, temple building traditions, state inscriptions. Later pharaohs refer back to the written annals of these beings as something real, something they were continuing. The followers of Horus occupy a fixed structural slot in the Egyptian account of their own origins. The Egyptians didn't treat them as a fairy tale. They treated them as the people who came before, the ones who brought astronomy, mathematics, agriculture, architecture, the keepers of sacred knowledge, the ones who, according to the tradition, knew the secrets of the pyramids and the Sphinx. And the work gangs that built Giza named themselves followers of the king, who, in the same tradition, inherited his authority directly from Horus, directly from that older line. So now lay the three clues side by side. The only name inside the pyramid was found under conditions no modern archaeologist would trust. The real, verified records of the builders were sealed in a cave 130 miles away and lost for millennia. And the Egyptians' own histories insist that before their human kings, the land was ruled and taught by a line of semi-divine beings called the followers. For 13,000 years, that mainstream science simply deletes. The hieroglyphs name the followers. The title of this whole question, who built Giza and where they came from, the Egyptians answered it themselves. They said the knowledge came from the followers of Horus. And they said those followers came down from the time of the gods. Now, does that prove that aliens built the pyramids, or that a literal race of immortal beings ruled Egypt for 13,000 years? Probably not. And this is where we slow down, because the honest version of this story is more interesting than the fantasy. Let's take the skeptics seriously, because on the hard facts, they're standing on solid ground. The Merer Papyrus is real, and it shows human workers, human boats, human logistics, building for a human king named Khufu around 2600 BCE. The work gangs were crews of laborers, not gods. Naming yourself the followers of the king was patriotism and team identity, like a regiment naming itself after a commander, not a confession of supernatural origin. And the long reigns in the king lists are exactly the kind of mythologized prehistory that almost every ancient civilization invented to make its rulers look eternal. The Sumerians did the same thing with their king list. Inflated reigns are a storytelling device, not a historical measurement. Even the forgery question, the most explosive part, cuts both ways. Some of the inscriptions in those chambers have been shown to continue behind the granite blocks, into gaps where Vyse's brush could never have reached. Marks that run behind the block that was set in place during construction had to be made before that block was placed, which means at least some of the painted graffiti in the Great Pyramid is genuinely ancient, genuinely from the building of the monument. Vyse may have found real marks. The question is only whether he touched up or added to the one cartouche that mattered most.